She tried calling the exterminators, but they did not answer. It was nearly 8 o'clock. She felt foolish about asking one of the neighbors. Though she and her husband lived in the house for 3 years, almost, she barely knew the neighbors. They had been welcomed to the street and later invited to block parties, but he had been too busy to go, had no desire to go, and she, after having once attended alone, made no further contact. The neighbors all had children, and lives very different from hers. A good neighbor, he said, was one you never noticed. He was a perfect neighbor. To go to one of them now, at night, asking for help with a bird in her house, they would think she was crazy. And he would not like it, her asking for favors. She didn't want to turn on any lights for fear of attracting the bird and blinding it. She tried to think of some way she could herd it downstairs. After the last episode upstairs, she had come to the conclusion that she was more of a danger to it than a help. So she sat there, listening for the sound of its wings. She was sitting in his chair, and an odd thought struck, one that made her smile. Before her was the television set. She was wishing that the bird could have somehow hit it and knocked it over, but it would take an eagle to do that. His routine was to come home late, get something to eat, heat it in the microwave, sit down in front of the TV, watch the news, and fall asleep. Sometime during the night he'd wake up, shut off the television, and come up to bed. It was a small television that once was color but now glowed with a single phosphorescent reddish-violet hue. She could not watch it, but it didn't bother him. Getting a new set would be a waste of money. It works well enough for me, he'd said. If I want to see a good picture, I'll go to a museum. She fell asleep sitting in his chair, wrapped in her coat, and she had a strange dream. She dreamed that there was a full eclipse of the sun. She told him and he refused to come out and see it. He had work to do. Don't look at it, was all he said. She did look at it, using Polaroid sunglasses. She watched the intersection of the moon and sun in the sky and felt the darkness gain dominion. And she could not believe the phenomenon that two bodies so far apart and so different, one a small cold rock, the other a huge ball of fire, could have such an effect on one another. Because of their distance and setting, their fates briefly intertwined. They became almost exactly similar discs, one dark, one light, one eclipsing for a moment the other. Then slowly came the touch of light and warmth again, and she found herself believing that there had to be more to life than mere happenstance. Coincidence could not account for this. She awoke to hear his car pull in the driveway, the slight but familiar rev of the engine. She knew the exact sound of it and the sequence of sounds that would follow. As the garage door went up, he parked the car, shut it off, got out, closed his door, closed the garage door, footsteps on the driveway, up the back steps, key in the lock. He opened the door and called her name, turned on the kitchen light. "I'm in here," she said, still sitting by the stairs, still wearing her coat. She knew how foolish she would appear to him, and what little patience he had for that. He came through the swinging door and turned on the chandelier light over the dining table. "What are you doing?" he said. He looked exactly as he had when he left in the morning, perfectly groomed and handsome in his dark blue suit. "Why are all the lights off?" he said. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in bed. It's cold in here." "I fell asleep," she said. "The bird is still in the house. It's upstairs." "Didn't you call the exterminators?" he said. "Why was the house dark?" "I tried. They didn't answer. I didn't want to turn on a light," she said. "I'm afraid if it flies around it won't hurt you," he said. "And they probably got some special after-hours number. Never mind now." "It was flying into the window," she said. "That's why I pulled the shades." "How did it get here in the first place?" he said. Apprehensive, she said, "I don't know. If it was in here, it was in here when I got home, in the kitchen. It startled me." He looked around, frowning. Then he walked over to the fireplace. "I'll bet you left the flue open again," he said. He knelt down and turned his head to look up the chimney. "You did," he said. "God damn it, you left the flue open, Elizabeth. How many times have I told you that all the heat escapes that way? No wonder it's so cold in here." "I'm sorry," she said. Yeah, sorry," he said, shaking his head. "Too late to build a fire. Let's just go to bed." He closed the damper in the flue with a thud, wiped the soot off his hand, careful not to get a speck on the cuff of his shirt. "The bird's still upstairs," she said. "It's probably a bat," he said. "No, it's a bird." "Bird, bat," he said. He went into the kitchen, washed his hands, and came back with a broom, started up the steps. She wished it had flown out the open door, wished that it had never come in the house. "Try not to hurt it," she said. "I'm not going to hurt it," he said. "I just don't want it flying into me." She followed him up the steps. "What are you going to do?" she said. He turned the upstairs lights on. "Where is it?" he said. "I don't know," she said. And to her horror, she started to cry. "Will you stop?" he said. "That's not going to help." "I'm sorry, Rich," she said, trying to control her voice. "It's just a bird," he said. "I'll take care of it." He checked cautiously through their bedroom, then went to the bathroom and turned on the light. Instantly, the bird came swooping out into the bedroom. "Jesus Christ!" he shouted, ducking. It fluttered wildly up near the ceiling, twittering madly again, its wings crashing against the walls. When it came within his reach, he swung the broom but missed and knocked a box off a chest. When the box hit the floor, coins and jewelry burst out, scattering across the floor. "Crap," he said. "God damn it." More determined, he stood up, took a fresh grip on the broom, and began beating the air on the walls, trying to hit the bird. Instead, he swiped a lamp. It tipped and crashed to the floor. She was crying and panting, and she shouted, "Oh, Rich, be careful. Stop." "It's your damn fault it's in here," he said. "I know it," she said. "I'm sorry. Leave it alone. Let it go." "Go," he said. "Go where, Elizabeth? I'm not going to bed with a bird in my house." Now he was angry, turning his attention to her, lecturing her. "It doesn't belong in here. It's going to knock things over and crap all over the place. This is just like work. I'm handed other people's problems. Here, we made a mess, Rich. You clean it up. And people think I'm the bad guy. What up? Will you stop crying?" She nodded her head and sat down on the bed, tried to catch her breath. He left the room, broom in hand. "Here it is," he called to her. "It's down. It must have knocked itself out." She came out into the hall and looked at it, a small brown lump on the carpet, no longer heaving. She looked down at it and said nothing. He brushed it with the broom, flipping it over on its side. "That's that," he said. "Probably broke its neck." "I overreacted," she said. "I'm sorry. I'll pick this up." She indicated the jewelry, coins, and the lamp. "I don't think anything is broken. Will you take care of the bird?" "Yes," he said. "I'll get a bag and turn out the lights downstairs." "Have you eaten yet?" She said. "No," he said. "I didn't have time." "I'll fix you something then," she said. She knelt down to pick up the coins and jewelry scattered on the floor. "I could make a sandwich from the turkey. How does that sound?" "Good," he said. "And a small salad?" "Yes," he said. "Fine, don't fuss, Beth. It's late." "That's all right," she said. "I don't mind. Could you make us a fire?" "A small one," he said.